Johnny Carson's favorite guests, the 9 stars who won his heart for 3 decades. Johnny Carson invited America into his late-night living room. As host of The Tonight Show, he interviewed more than 22,000 guests, nervous newcomers making their first appearance, and some of the biggest legends Hollywood ever produced. But among those thousands, there were only a handful with whom Carson wasn't just a professional host, he was genuinely enjoying himself too. This script is about the guests who returned to The Tonight Show again and again, and with whom Carson shared a connection that felt different. With some, he became emotional. With others, comedy found its perfect rhythm. Some brought out his intellectual side, and some simply made him laugh without holding back. Let's begin, a list steeped in the memories of Hollywood's golden age. Johnny Carson's favorite guests, the 9 stars who won his heart. 1. Jimmy Stewart, the guest who made Carson cry. Jimmy Stewart was one of those rare Hollywood actors people said was exactly the same off-screen as he appeared on it, simple, humble, and completely unpretentious. Whenever he appeared on The Tonight Show, a different atmosphere would settle over the studio, as if an old friend had walked into the room. There was a natural hesitation to Stewart's interviews. He would search for words, sometimes pause, sometimes repeat himself, but it was precisely this quality that set him apart from other celebrities who always seemed polished and rehearsed. For a host like Carson, who valued authenticity himself, Stewart was a refreshing change of pace. The most memorable moment came in 1981, when Stewart read a poem he'd written about the death of his beloved golden retriever. Simple but deeply moving lines spread a hush across the studio. Carson, known for his emotional restraint, was different that night. His eyes welled up on camera, and he made no attempt to hide it. That moment became more than just a piece of television history. It became a symbol of 2 of entertainment's biggest names showing up as their true selves, without a script, without a performance. Even after Stewart left, The Tonight Show team knew that when he was the guest, the schedule would loosen up a little, segments would run long, commercial breaks would get pushed. This was proof that for Carson, Stewart wasn't just another guest, he was a Hollywood example that always inspired him. The way Carson sat with Stewart was different too. Carson normally kept the interview under control, with a rhythm to his questions, but in front of Stewart, he too would slow down, as if trying to figure out how to phrase the next question so as not to interrupt Stewart's train of thought. It was a kind of mutual respect that showed on both sides, and it may be exactly why Stewart's visits were considered so special, not just for the audience, but for Carson himself. 2. Bob Newhart, the master who made it all look effortless. If Jimmy Stewart touched Carson's heart, Bob Newhart engaged his comedic mind. Newhart was a stand-up comedian turned sitcom star, and his dry wit, perfect timing, and knack for finding humor in life's small, mundane moments closely matched Carson's own style. What set Newhart apart from other comedians was his conversational approach. He didn't arrive with prepared jokes or recycled material from his act. Instead, he had genuine conversations with Carson that gradually turned into comedy on their own. Those who watched the two together beyond the timing itself said it felt like watching 2 jazz musicians jam. One would start a story, the other would come in with the right line at the right moment, and the bit would build from there. Carson was normally strict about keeping segments to their allotted time, but that rule bent when Newhart was the guest. If Newhart was in the middle of a good story, Carson wouldn't cut him off, he'd delay the commercial break instead. Newhart's simplicity was another quality that stood out. He never arrived with an entourage, treated crew members with respect, and remembered their names. Carson valued this a great deal. He himself stayed away from anyone with a diva attitude. Their friendship ran deep enough that they occasionally golfed together, and to those who knew Carson well, that was solid proof that he considered someone a true friend. Beyond the interviews, Newhart's stammering storytelling style was also something that set him apart. He never told a story straight through, he'd wind around it, hesitate, as if he himself were surprised by where the story was going. This style matched Carson's own deadpan delivery so well that there was never an awkward pause between them, even silence felt funny, which is exactly why audiences loved their pairing so much. 3. Burt Reynolds, the guest who understood the game. When Burt Reynolds appeared on The Tonight Show, people knew it wouldn't just be an interview, it would be a friendly competition between 2 men, each trying to one-up the other. At the peak of his fame in the 1970s, Reynolds understood something that most other celebrities often forgot, that the host-guest relationship worked best as a playful partnership, not just a chance to plug a movie. While other stars arrived with talking points handed to them by publicists, Reynolds sometimes arrived with a water pistol hidden in his jacket. Their prank wars became legendary on the show. Once, in the middle of a supposedly serious discussion, Reynolds suddenly hit Carson in the face with shaving cream. Rather than getting angry, Carson was delighted. According to staff members, he laughed harder backstage than the audience did on camera. Carson loved this kind of thing, real surprise, the kind that isn't scripted. And when Carson made jokes at his expense, Reynolds genuinely enjoyed them, without ever taking offense. This was a kind of test for Carson. Could this person take a joke without getting upset? Reynolds passed that test every time. Even at the height of his popularity, Reynolds never took himself so seriously that the mood on set became heavy. Whenever a controversial topic or a failed movie came up, Reynolds would turn it into a joke too, which relaxed both the audience and Carson. This was a special skill of his, turning difficult questions into something light, without hiding anything. That's exactly why Carson kept inviting him back. The show always felt unpredictable and alive when Reynolds was around. 4. Orson Welles, the genius who fascinated Carson. Most people remember Johnny Carson as a friendly, joke-cracking host. But when Orson Welles was the guest, a completely different side of Carson would emerge, deeply intellectual, curious, and genuinely fascinated. Conversations with Welles drifted away from Hollywood gossip or promotional talk, moving instead toward art, politics, magic, and history. These interviews showed a side of Carson that his close friends knew but the public rarely saw: well-read, curious about the world, just as comfortable discussing Shakespeare as he was telling a joke. In one memorable appearance, Welles performed live magic tricks, illusions so complex they stunned even the crew. Carson, who had a lifelong fascination with magic, looked like an excited kid watching it all unfold. Another of Welles's qualities was his honesty. He spoke as openly about his failures as he did about his successes. Carson appreciated this candor deeply, since he was often put off by celebrities who tried hard to maintain a perfect image. Sometimes these conversations went so deep that they drifted far from The Tonight Show's usual light entertainment format. But Carson never rushed Welles or tried to steer him toward easier topics. Instead, he seemed to fully enjoy the chance to step outside his usual host role and simply be a curious person eager to hear new ideas and new perspectives. 5. Jack Benny, the master who taught Carson. When Jack Benny appeared on The Tonight Show, a strange shift would happen. The usually composed host would turn into an appreciative student in the presence of one of comedy's pioneers. Benny's timing, his subtle reactions, getting laughs from just a look or a pause, these were all things Carson had adopted into his own career. When Benny was the guest, Carson listened more closely, laughed more genuinely, and showed a level of respect rarely seen with other guests. These meetings felt like a passing of the torch between generations. Benny, born in 1894, was among the pioneers of radio comedy back when Carson was still a child. By the 1970s, when Benny appeared on The Tonight Show in his late 70s and early 80s, his timing was still flawless. There was only one celebrity photo in Carson's office, and it was of Jack Benny. That says a great deal about who Carson admired most, not just the biggest stars of the moment, but the man who had shown him what television comedy could be at its very best. Commercial breaks with Benny were different too. Carson, who usually used those moments to talk with producers or prepare for the next segment, stayed fully engaged with Benny, asking him questions about old radio comedians who had shaped his own career. These moments felt like a private history lesson for Carson, and he savored every minute of it. 6. Carol Burnett, the guest who brought sunshine. When Carol Burnett appeared on The Tonight Show, something unique happened. Johnny Carson, one of television's most controlled performers, would gradually relax. His shoulders would loosen, his smile would widen, and the invisible barrier he usually kept between himself and his guests would disappear. What set Burnett apart from other regular guests was her natural chemistry with Carson. Most interviews ran with a somewhat formal rhythm, but conversations with Burnett flowed like old friends catching up, as if two equals were simply enjoying each other's company. Burnett was one of the few performers Carson let go completely off script. Most celebrities were gently guided through predetermined talking points, but Burnett had complete freedom to follow conversational tangents, start impromptu games, or even turn the tables and interview Carson herself. Carson's trust in Burnett ran deep enough that he sometimes let her run well past her allotted time, even bumping other guests to make room. And when the producers signaled it was time to wrap up, Carson would sometimes wave them off if Burnett was in the middle of a good story. Burnett had another quality Carson valued greatly. Despite her enormous success, there wasn't a trace of arrogance in her. She remembered crew members' names, asked about their families, and genuinely listened to their answers. Carson noticed these small things, which is exactly why he referenced Burnett's appearances as the gold standard for how a guest should behave. 7. James Garner, the movie star who stayed completely real. When James Garner settled onto the Tonight Show couch, viewers saw a rare kind of interview, one that felt like two regular guys talking, rather than a movie star making a promotional appearance. Garner's greatest quality was his complete authenticity. Many Hollywood leading men seemed to be performing even when the cameras weren't rolling, but Garner brought a natural, unpretentious quality to his visits that Carson found refreshing. His Hollywood stories had a distinctly grounded quality. When he talked about his films or shows, he focused on the human moments rather than self-aggrandizing tales, practical jokes, friendships formed with crew members, mistakes, all told the way someone might talk about their regular job. This down-to-earth attitude showed off-camera as well. Minimal entourage, thanking crew members, treating everyone from pages to producers with the same respect. Carson valued this kind of behavior a great deal. He paid close attention to how guests treated the staff when they thought no important person was watching. Garner had another quality: he could tell old Hollywood stories without ever sounding stuck in the past. He talked about working with people like Marlon Brando or Julie Andrews as casually as someone mentioning an office colleague, with no hint of name-dropping. This mix, old memories paired with a modern sensibility, made him a favorite across generations of viewers. 8. George Burns, the legend who kept getting better. When George Burns appeared on The Tonight Show, especially in his later years, viewers witnessed something extraordinary: Johnny Carson, television's unquestioned king, treating his guest with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. At 80, 90, and eventually past 100 years old, Burns represented something Carson deeply respected: longevity in a notoriously fickle business, and a living connection to vaudeville, the entertainment tradition that had shaped Carson's own comedic sensibility. What made Burns unique among Carson's favorites was how he improved with age. While many older performers relied on recycling past glories, Burns kept bringing fresh material and sharp observations well into his 90s. In these interviews, Carson's whole approach changed. He'd ask a question and then lean back, giving Burns complete control of the segment. Sometimes Carson wouldn't say a word for 2 or 3 minutes while Burns was on a roll, quite unusual for a host who normally jumped in every 30 seconds with most guests. Burns himself was aware of this special treatment, and his own recollections stand as testimony to just how much respect Carson showed him. For Burns, Carson's respect went beyond comedic timing alone. It extended to a dedication to craft and professionalism, qualities Carson himself spent his whole career trying to live up to. 9. Lucille Ball, television royalty. When Lucille Ball appeared on The Tonight Show, two television pioneers shared the same stage. One had reinvented late-night television, the other had transformed the sitcom format a generation earlier. Ball's appearances stood out not just because of her comedic talent, but because the two performers genuinely respected each other, perhaps understanding the pressures of carrying a television show better than almost anyone else in the industry. Carson, who normally liked to remain the center of The Tonight Show, would visibly defer to Ball during her appearances, giving her the best camera angles, laughing genuinely at her jokes, and showing a warmth that went beyond his usual professional courtesy. Another part of Ball's identity mattered here too. She was a pioneering businesswoman in an industry where men held most of the power. This impressed Carson deeply, as he had built his own production company as well. In one memorable appearance, Carson showed Ball footage from an old screen test of hers, something she hadn't seen in decades. Ball became visibly emotional in the moment, though she quickly recovered with her characteristic wit. That moment showed that Carson knew exactly what would touch her, and that Ball trusted him enough to show her real emotions rather than just her polished public image.